today. JB, as I will call him today, as he and I interacted, only really got to know each other well in the last 22 odd years. But of course, his life was much longer than that. His illustrious life started on the 15th of March 1938, and he went to be with the Lord that he trusted in on the 5th of January this year, at the ripe age of 82. My knowledge, my memory of JB is of a person who spent his entire life fighting for justice and freedom. He was a man who cared deeply for the underprivileged members of our society, particularly in the 1960s for poor, oppressed black workers and the general citizens of Zimbabwe. He demonstrated at a very early age this fundamental commitment. At the tender age of 26, he became ZAPU Youth Chairman for Magwegwe branch, a position he held until 1970. In very tumultuous times in this country's history, that was no small act to join that struggle then in the face of the Rhodesian Front and the Declaration of Independence in 1965. These were tense times, and it demonstrated not only his fundamental commitment to justice and freedom, but also his profound courage. But he went beyond politics. He was a person who had a delightfully non-partisan approach to life. That was demonstrated at the same time when he became secretary of the Magwegwe Residents Association as well in the early 1960s. But his association then with these groups increasingly drew him into the plight of workers, and he increasingly became involved in trying to do what he could to be salt and light in his community in protecting the underprivileged and protecting workers' rights. And in that way, he from 1967 onwards, increasingly got involved in the trade union movement. He was secretary of the Amalgamated Furniture and Cabinet Workers Union from 1967 to 1968. In 1970, he became the secretary of the National Employment Council for the furniture industry in Zimbabwe. And at the same time, of course, as tensions rose in our nation, he did what he could to support those who were trying to bring an end to the injustice faced in the then Rhodesia. He was heavily involved in ZAPU and the National Democratic Party, with ZAPU youths known as Zanda, and in that role, I'm told he traveled far and wide throughout Zimbabwe, but particularly in the areas close to Zambia, in Binga, in Wangi, in Victoria Falls, supplying shoes and the like to guerrillas in support of that struggle. Of course, the government of the day finally came to realize what JB was up to, and that resulted in his detention at Wawa in 1973. and he found himself incarcerated in Wawa prison with other luminaries, other people whose names are written in the annals of Zimbabwean history. He was detained with people like Norman Sikali, with people like Didymus Mutasa, and he was detained with my dear friend and former client, Sidney Malunga, who, as we know, died in 1994. But he didn't give up the struggle within detention. He came from an underprivileged background, and so he determined that he was going to improve his lot in detention. And remarkably, he got his O-levels whilst in detention. He demonstrated in that a spirit of never say die, never give up, always improve yourself no matter what your conditions. Eventually, in February 1977, he was released by order of the then Minister of Justice, Hilary Squires, and he then went to join his dear wife in the United Kingdom. And he made sure in those changed circumstances that he would improve his lot and give himself the skills that he needed. And so he studied. He got a diploma in management from the British Institute of Management. He got a certificate in management accounting from the Association of Costs and Executive Accounting in London, and eventually became an associate accountant. Returning to this country after independence in the early 1980s. But he never forgot his roots. He was then a founding member of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, and immediately threw himself into trying to still, in the post-independence situation, helping workers. From 1982, he was initially personnel manager in Sting Clothing here in Milwaukee, but then he decided to go more to help the wider community and became an education officer in the Chilocho District Council from 1985 to 1987. And remember how courageous even that move was. If we recall the history of our country in 1985, in the election of 1985, the situation in places like Chilocho was extraordinarily tense. The 5th Brigade had been deployed there in 1983. Hundreds, thousands of people had been disappeared and massacred. And we know that the regime then targeted male people who supported ZANU, who had a history in ZANU. And so his mere act, which may just seem like a line in his CV now, actually demonstrates profound courage that he was prepared to be an education officer in Chilocho in 1985 through to 1987. Of course, in 1987, the end of 1987 was the Unity Accord and the end of the crisis in Matabeleland. And I think he then felt that he could then move out. He became a Labour officer in the Ministry of Manpower, Labour and Social Welfare. And then in 1992, went to the same company that Sidney Malunga worked in, Radar Industries. I don't know the history behind, but I suspect very much that his old comrade, Sidney Malunga, and him worked very close together in that business. That, of course, was the time after the Unity Accord, and during that time he took up a variety of posts in ZANU-PF. But he was a man of principle his entire life. And unlike so many of his colleagues in ZAPU, he remained loyal to those founding principles. And so it was in the late 1990s that although he had these deep roots in ZAPU and then ZANU-PF that he decided that things were going the wrong way, that the rights of workers in particular were being abused. And so with his comrades in the trade union movement, people like Gibson Sibanda, he became a founding member of the MPC, which was established, as we know, in February, in September 1999. And it was in that role that I then first got to know him well. We were both elected in June 2000. He was elected as the MP for Pelindaba. And my experience of him in Parliament was of a person who had this remarkable smile. All of us will remember his smile, his gentle nature, his balanced approach to life, but his steely determination, his absolute integrity, his commitment to fundamental principles. And he demonstrated that in Parliament, quietly, but in a determined fashion. And he could not be criticized by anyone because of his deep liberation credentials, his deep, consistent approach to protecting all people's rights in Zimbabwe. And so in that way, he was a highly effective member of Parliament for the NDC, because he was quietly able to state what was right, what was wrong, without any equivocation. And that is my profound memory. And that remains my memory of JB, right the way through all the battles of the 2000s, and even up until recently. JB remained one of, I'm sure, all of us, our most consistent friends. There was no guile about JB. You got what you saw. If he felt that you were wrong, he would tell you straight, not behind your back. But what also struck me about JB is that consistent fight for justice his entire life was not self-seeking in any way. He didn't get involved in politics. He didn't become a member of Parliament to enrich himself. He became a member of Parliament because of his beliefs, because he felt that by being in Parliament he could improve the lives of other people, and not just his own small circle, of the lives of all Zimbabweans, irrespective of their background, of their religious beliefs, of their ethnic background, of their race. And one of the most refreshing things I found about JB as a white Zimbabwean was that he didn't look at the color of my skin. He didn't look at my background. He looked at my heart, and he looked at my present commitment. And I think he did that with everyone. He judged you on where you were now and what you were demonstrating in your life. How different is that from what we see in our Parliament today? How different is that from what we see in so many members of Parliament today, who are solely there for what they can get out of the system themselves, who are fly-by-night characters, not people who demonstrate their commitments, not just over a few years, but over decades. In JB's instance, 8 decades of consistent commitment to human rights, to the principle of non-violence, to the principle that the underprivileged of society should be looked after. And in that sense, I personally found him a deeply inspiring person, because he never changed. The JB I knew in 1990 was the JB I knew a few years ago when I last saw him. Unchanged, unwavering. But he also demonstrated a remarkable peace. I can't remember personally ever seeing him completely flustered. And I think that that possibly comes to what the Dean was saying, that he had a profound faith. He had a trust in a God that doesn't work according to our timetable or use our methods, but a God who is a God fundamentally of justice, and in his time achieves his justice on earth. And I think that that is what gave Jacob this peace that he had. We have so much to learn from his life. Our nation has so much to learn from his life. And I hope that young, aspiring members of Parliament, from whatever political party they come from, whatever their political belief will come from, will take time to study JB's life, to be inspired by it, and to seek to emulate his life. Only then will we see change in our beloved Zimbabwe. So, as a family, you can be proud of your husband, of your father, of your grandfather, of your uncle. He is a man who is truly one of Zimbabwe's heroes. A man who demonstrated over the 8 decades of his life this profound commitment to his nation, to his family, and to his colleagues. May his soul rest in peace. God bless you.
Greetings to you all. My name is Bafana Khumalo, and I will read a speech by my brother Bhekuzulu. And it reads: he understood that black people must be seen to be contributing to civilization. His son, understanding that, was first human to show scientifically that magnetism organizes into a wave formation, meaning it is going some medium, proving a concept of ether. As it organizes, it must be something discrete. That discrete thing, Bhekuzulu named Khumalo in honor of his ancestors. If blacks continue to wait for permission from those who constantly push them down, it might remain only black discovery for a long time. And Zimbabwe will still be auditioned. Imagine believing some other people will give you resources to do science better than them. Jefret Bafana Khumalo was a proud man. Understanding this, his son would save to do his science, even paying for laboratory space from his savings. Understanding progress is you doing it, getting your hands dirty. Those who think being robbed by whites makes one a failure were never part of the team for free blacks. The only influence I had in such big things. Thank you.
In memory of Jefret Bafana Khumalo. Many people called him JB. I also called him the same. JB, we share the same great-grandfather. Khumalo, our great-grandfather was a big man, chief, I mean a king in the thanks for the previous speakers, in particular David Colbert, who is outlined to us what kind of a person J.P. was. He was humble, approachable, courageous, and he never liked to see other people being oppressed. That's why he joined politics at the tender age of 26, and he was detained because he never wanted other people to be oppressed. J.P. was bigger than the family, bigger than his family, bigger than the Khumalo clan. J.P. belonged to the nation. That's what it was. And whenever I talked about other people, when I mentioned that J.P. is no longer there, he's passed away, those who know him will say, oh, what a humble man, what a humble person. J.P. would never show what kind of person, what kind of things he has. As you meet him, some people say, but is he the one who's this and that, something like that. So that's a kind sign of humility, approachability. J.P. could associate with anybody easily without creating some barriers as to what kind of person he was. I liked him very much. Personally, we had many interactions together with him because I regarded him as my brother, and he liked me so much. Whatever good he wanted me to get, he would inform me and connect with me. I remember when I was in South Africa, where I was a professor and a dean at the Northwest University. He visited me sometime just to give me some update of things that I remember sometimes phoning me when there was a vacancy here in Bulawayo, a vacancy for the town clerk. He thought I was suitable for that kind of job, you know, and I liked him very much for that. And he visited me as well when I was at Northwest to see how I was getting on, and came back here and with many good things. Very often he showed commitment to the organizations that he joined. That's why they been appointed and elected him to get these big positions. He was elected by the MTC party together with the deputy collector to be a member of parliament. It's an honor, a really big honor. We became proud of him. I'm proud of him as a brother and a Khumalo person. He has shown commitment. For example, we have this I happen to be a member as well to discuss about issues concerning our plan. Because Khumalos are a reality. I'm not faking it. It's a non-fact. So wanted to discuss, we often discuss about these things, but how we can revise things that are related to our plan and so on and so on. In that committee, in that organization, he's a member, he was elected to be deputy chairperson to show really that he's the person who is recognized for his capabilities and his qualities and his commitment, and we give him these positions. Very often when we go to these meetings, we would sit next to each other, and they never wanted to see these people look down upon. They really wanted to have these family members respected and so forth and so forth. This time when I sit next to him, I remember there was a meeting that we had sometime when we come from South Africa and so on and so on. We're supposed to introduce ourselves. And he was sitting next to me. He said, tell them what the professor. Tell them that I'm a professor. You know, he was jovial also, not really that he was proud to look down upon other people, but he was just a person who is courageous, as David Colbert has mentioned. Courageous, to stand in the front of an enemy, to express his views, to show what kind of person he was. He never wanted to see oppression. we together actually most of the time, spend a lot of time in the UK. When he joined his wife there, we could see there was a ZAP organization at that time. He was strong, he was the person who stood firm on his views, and he would not waver on making sure things are done right in the organization, when to make sure things are okay. Now, also, despite being a politician, JP realized that not everything ends in this world. That's what I like about him. He eventually got baptized as a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He knew that there is a world to come. I remember before he joined that, when we used to meet him, when we used to talk in English, I was a member of the church already. He would say, hey, my brother. Anyway, when I tried to invite him, he would say, you better be there. And I did decide, you don't know what is going to benefit who and when. So he never really committed to Christianity as most politicians do, because most of these politicians have suffered too much. They say, where is God now? But I'm glad he went beyond that. He was a committed member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we believe that when Jesus comes the second time, we shall meet with our brother, my brother. And he represented us very well as a family, as a clan, and as a nation. Thank you very much.
What you need is catch one. I think my past eight. What you said is that catch one. And I walk out of my past eight. I think my past eight. I then I am so difficult. What I am for my put in a lamb shot. Now sometimes the first catch one is catch one plus catch one. What I think I put I in chair. You put lamp over my phone. But cleaning. La causa va finire. O una buona e filo cavava, il locale c'è la buona, e stessa hamba. Qualcuno magari con bambana, qualcuno magari con tandana, qualcuno magari con che si sa che si sale si bambini. Mina ito che mai cara se la kulo la kana, uti loba nje wazishiwa ubaba wasibalisa ngendlela enhle okumangalisayo wasishiyela indlela okufanele siyilandele emhle futhi sibambisane nini nje sonke sihambe endleleni yona leyo yokuthandana endleleni yona leyo yokubambana
ngendlela ayesithanda sonke ngayo. Yazi wawusuka uhamba la nje edolobheni ahambe ukubamba isandla lingena nje ezindaweni umzwe sithi uyamazi lo musibani wazalwa musibani umfowethu uyamazi lo musibani bezokwa amapikitsha xa ufuna ukuthi ulungisa amapikitsha akho kuze khona uyamazi lo and kwakukuhle njalo. Ngiyafisa ukuthi la nxa sesithini baba sikubambe nje